Oh, there's Lara going live. She's about to join us.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, guys. Can you see me?
Yes.
It's working.
Hooray.
Hooray.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. I was just explaining what these literary lunch breaks have been. We have a mix of programming throughout the weeks, a lot of adult, but also children and YA and middle grade. But now that you're here, I figure we'll just start. I'll give everyone a little background of who you are and why you're joining us today. Lara Prescott, right over there, is the author of The Secrets We Kept. Yay. An instant New York Times bestseller and a Hello Sunshine and Reese Witherspoon book club pick. Lara received her MFA from the Michener Center for Writers at the University of Texas. She studied political science at American University in Washington, D.C., and international development in Namibia and South Africa. And prior to writing fiction, she worked as a political campaign consultant. The Secrets We Kept is Lara's debut novel and will be translated or has been translated into over 30 languages and adapted for the film. And Lara's writing has appeared in Southern Review, Hudson Review, Crazy Horse, and more. And she lives in Austin, Texas with her husband, son, cats, and dog. So Thank you so much for joining us. And maybe would you like to start by reading some?
I would love to. I'm just going to read a little bit, kind of from the beginning-ish of the book. And it's from the perspective of Sally, who was an old OSS intelligence officer and is now in the in-between part when the war has ended and the CIA has just begun. So she's looking for a new line of work. And she goes, I'd been a nurse, a waitress, an heiress. I once posed as a librarian. I'd been someone's wife, someone's mistress, fiance, lover. I'd been Russian, French, and British. I'd been from Pittsburgh, Palm Springs, and Winnipeg. I could become just about anyone. I had one of those faces, the wide eyes, the ready smile that suggested I was an open book, someone who kept no secrets, and if she did, wouldn't be able to keep them anyway. That, and with the rise in popularity of actresses with more generous wastelands like Marilyn Monroe and Jane Mansfield, my figure, which I attempted to diet away as a teenager, worked to my advantage in prying secrets out of powerful men. I'd walk right out of there with my head held high, then rally the girls for drinks, followed by dancing at Cafe Trinidad until closing, which in DC was unfortunately at midnight. By the next day, after I nursed my hangover with a cold compress and a Bloody Mary, I had a minor breakdown at the realization I had no job, no income, and no savings. The latter due to one of my blessings and curses, a heightened appreciation for beautiful things. The blessing was that my innate sense of style made people think I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth and not a clapboard row house in Pittsburgh's Little Italy. The curse was that my good eye often exceeded my means. I knew I needed to formulate a plan before my bank account dwindled to code red level. There was no running to mommy or daddy, as some of my friends had the luxury of doing when times got tough. That evening, I flipped through my little black book and set up a stream of dates with a DC lobbyist and lawyer set, an occasional diplomat, and one or two congressmen. The dates were tedious and exhausting, but at the end of the day, the rent was paid on my Georgetown apartment. I'd gotten some nice dinners out of them, and the men whose company I pretended to enjoy kept me in couture that rivaled Bev's. Bev has good fashion, side note. I was not attracted to them, and yet how easy it had been to convince them that I was. That line of work suited me fine, but after a while I got bored with the taxi, dinner, hotel rotation. That and the high level of personal upkeep was wearing me out. The brushing, tweezing, plucking, dyeing, waxing, bleaching, squeezing, even the endless shopping were beginning to take their toll. And that's where I'll leave you.
Thank you so much for reading that. I love that section. If you're just joining us, we're here with Lara Prescott, author of The Secrets We Kept, and I'll just jump in right with some questions, and then maybe we can leave time for one or two at the end. And viewers can send in their questions in the comment area below, and we'll read the questions and see if we can get to them at the end. So this book, one of the reasons I love this book so much is because it deals with these huge historical events, but on such a personal level to these characters. And I wanted to start today's discussion with the personal connection that you have with the story, and why the story behind Dr. Zhivago is important to you, and why you wanted to tell this story.
Sure. So I've been interested in Dr. Zhivago pretty much before I can remember, simply because I was named Lara after Boris Pasternak's heroine. And it wasn't until I was a teenager that I actually read Pasternak's book, but I grew up watching the David Lean 1965 film all throughout my childhood and just established this real love for Yuri and Lara and everything that happens to them in that story. But when I did read the book, it was one of those books that really had an impact on me where I wanted to keep reading it every few years. It's like one of those touchstone books. And I think I got different things out of it at different times in my life. As a teenager, I was really interested in the love story between Yuri and Lara. But when I was working in politics in Washington, D.C., I was really interested in how this book was censored in the Soviet Union and why, what was so subversive about the words Boris Pasternak had written. And then when I quit my job in politics to become a writer, I really was focused on Boris Pasternak's sentence level construction because first and foremost, he was a poet, one of the most famous living poets at the time. And so it's just something that's changed and grown with me over the years, but it wasn't until 2014 that I learned about the secret history of the book, that the CIA had used Dr. Zhivago as a tool of propaganda during the Cold War. And after that, I was just absolutely fascinated. So it was all these different interests in my life that brought it together, and I started researching and went from there.
Cool. And you have some artifacts, right, that you gained along the way on your travels. You have an early copy.
I do. I should have had it in my office. This is my little Austin shed office.
Not to spring it on you.
I have some of my Russian dolls in the back that I
cool.
when I traveled to Russia to do some research, and I went to Moscow and Peredelkino, which was this small writers' colony about 20 miles outside of Moscow that Boris Pasternak lived in. And so, yes, I have a CIA copy of Dr. Zhivago. That's this little miniature edition. It's printed on Bible stock paper, so it's extremely thin and delicate. And I have a first edition Italian Dr. Zhivago. So people that don't know, Dr. Zhivago was banned in the Soviet Union. It was seen as subversive. And so actually the Italians printed and published it first. So that's why the first edition's Italian.
That's so cool. So you mentioned a little bit of your working in politics before you were a novelist. And so could you talk a little bit about how your experiences in politics informed your writing? And because aside from the CIA happenings in the novel, there is just a lot of running around DC, of people who work in politics in the novel. And so I was wondering how your personal experience informed some of that.
Sure. I think that I'm always interested in the way words are used to change people's hearts and minds. And, now I'm a fiction writer, but before, when I was working in politics, I was writing ad copy for political campaigns. So whether it was digital ad copy or television ads or stump speeches, I was writing words that hopefully would change people's minds to either vote for someone or turn out to vote or vote for a ballot initiative. And so living and working in Washington, D.C., first and foremost, I was interested in words, but the culture of D.C. is so different than anywhere else I've lived, certainly very different than here in Austin, Texas. And I think I'm constantly interested in the people that are drawn to that lifestyle. I had to get out. It wasn't suited for me. But, people who are attracted to power and who flock don't necessarily want to be in power, but want to be whispering in the ear of someone in power, or be kind of manipulating things behind the scenes. And so many people are interested in that. And I had no interest in it myself, but I feel like I've picked up a lot of that power dynamics, and also the power dynamics that still exist between men and women in DC, and, you know, people who are striving to advance their careers and people who are kind of coming down from the pinnacle of their careers. There's so much going on. I don't think I ever thought I would write about DC. I lived there for almost a decade. I went to college there and then I worked there until I left it, which maybe is, you know, a good writer tip. You know, if you're wanting to write about a city, maybe move away from it so you can kind of get a different perspective.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And interesting that you brought up the difference between men and women in politics, because I found reading this book that there was such a difference between how the men and women kept their secrets in this book.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, there's a lot about secrets. It's in the title, but um, a lot of it is so dependent on these women keeping secrets. And I was wondering if you could talk about the different roles that the women play, both in the book and maybe in the era.
Mm-hmm.
Why are women so important, or were so important, historically and in your novel as well?
Sure. During my research about the early days of the CIA, I learned that women were usually given roles such as secretary, typist. They worked in personnel or in record keeping. And that was a level that most, I'd say 99.9% of people could not advance from that level. They could never become managers or officers in their own right.
Mm-hmm.
And the more I learned about these women, especially women who had fought in World War II and had served on the front lines alongside some of the men who later established the CIA. But once the war was over and they transitioned to the CIA, they were set behind a desk and greatly underutilized. And, you know, going back into 1953, the CIA knew that they had a problem. They actually had a petticoat panel, which is what they called it, to see if women were being underutilized in the CIA. And of course, they found out yes, but really nothing changed for decades and decades. And it's still greatly, even though there's a, you know, head women at the CIA, it's still very unequal in today's, you know, by today's standards. So I really was struck by those women and the roles that they filled and the roles that they kind of transcended for themselves. So even if they were said, you're going to be a typist, that's all you can do, they utilized secrets as kind of a power that they had. You know, they could have this power to fade into the background because people thought they weren't paying attention, but they were paying attention and they were taking notes. And I think having that power was essential to women during that time. And of course, a lot of my characters are fictional on the Western side, but very much influenced by real life women spies like Virginia Hall and Betty McIntosh, who worked in the CIA. And then if you think of the secrets over on the east side of my novel, based on real life characters like Boris Pasternak's mistress and muse, Olga Ivanskaya, I mean, she was keeping the secrets of what he was writing. And was it subversive? Was it anti-Soviet? She was sentenced to the Gulag not once, but twice to pressure Pasternak to stop writing and to punish her for her associations with Boris Pasternak. And yet she kept that secret as well to protect him and to also protect the book that he was writing. So I think if you think of these ways that seem like small ways that women were influential during this time, they actually are much bigger than I previously thought, you know, due to my research. And I didn't start out trying to write a story just from women's perspectives, but I just kept being more drawn to their stories the more I researched.
It's really fascinating, and it's such an interesting book because, like, I guess with a lot of historical fiction, you know, you're learning while you're enjoying it, but it just felt so like I felt like I knew the characters even though they were fictional based on this historical event. So I had one more question, and that is about your book tour. So when the book came out last year, you had a pretty big book tour, and you were traveling a lot to a lot of countries. And were you intending to do any more traveling before this all happened? And how have I guess virtual events like this played a part in your life?
Yeah, so I was still planning on attending a variety of events throughout the spring into the summer, at libraries, different festivals. And when they started being canceled, it was really, really heartbreaking. And mostly I was very sad for people whose books had just come out. You know, I had been touring, you know, for almost a year at this point, both pre-pub and then after pub. But it was really heartbreaking to see when people's books, and I'm going to hold a few of them up, who came out in March. My awesome friend Maria's book is a collection of short stories, Good Citizens Need Not Fear. And we were supposed to do an event together at Book People that got canceled.
Oh,
And so things like that were really heartbreaking to me. But yeah, pick up this book and pick up Deb Olin Unther's book, Far and Aid, which
yeah.
is also amazing. Because you know, their tours were just getting off the ground, and all those events got canceled. But it's been so great to see things like Texas Book Fest and other organizations doing these online you know, events, because one, we're all sitting at home, we need that connection. And I think talking about books is one of the greatest medicines that we have right now, as well as reading books. So yeah, it was very sad to have some of
Mm-hmm.
those things canceled. But in my paperback, it will be coming out in the next few months, and we'll see what
Oh,
happens.
cool.
There was going to be a tour plan for that, but we'll see how that either transitions online, or hopefully I can get out to bookstores, which is one of my favorite things to do in the world.
Yeah, so I hope so. Let's see. We have a little bit of time. People have any questions for Lara or about the book? Maybe as we're waiting for any questions to come in, do you have just like one thing that you want people to know getting overlooked, or just something that you really are proud of, for like a little detail that maybe went under the radar?
Oh, that's good. I think a lot of the draw is the women spies, and I think a lot has been talked about the CIA culture and the Mad Men culture. But I do think there's so much that was going on just with the publication in the East, and you know, why was this book banned, even though it's not really considered subversive by modern standards, not at all. And so
Mm-hmm.
diving into those reasons, and also the pressures that were put on Boris Pasternak to turn down the Nobel Prize and to kind of separate himself from his readers in this
Mm-hmm.
really tragic way. And I think that maybe that's something that I'm really interested in, you know, talking about more of, you know, why words are banned and why governments even today continue to ban people's books and or challenge their books. And I think anytime you see a book being banned or challenged, you have to think of the government structures that are in place that are suppressing those books and why. And I think a lot
Mm-hmm.
of people
Mm-hmm.
don't realize, you know, living in the United States, that there's still books being banned throughout the world, and also writers being imprisoned throughout the world. And that's something that I hope my book
Mm-hmm.
sparks, you know, people to learn more about.
One of the questions that I saw came in was, what is your favorite spy thriller?
Oh, my favorite spy thriller. I mean, Le Carre, any of Le Carre's books, probably, you know, uh, I don't even know if I can name one, but I would say anything he's written is just absolutely brilliant, and, you know, high literary, but also just plot driven and psychological, and just absolutely beautiful. And I love the book American Spy that came out last year as well. So if
Mm-hmm.
anyone hasn't read that book, you should check it out. And I think that now women are writing more of spy genre, if you will, which I think is really cool, because it's been such a male dominated field for so long.
Mm-hmm. Um, and then I think last question that I saw come through was, what's next for Lara
All
Prescott?
right. I am working on a new book right now. So in my little shed, I head out here in the mornings and sometimes in the afternoons too. I have my writing companion, Mo, who's
All
there. I don't know
right.
if you can see. She follows me out here every day, but I'm working on a novel. It's right, all I can really say is it's mostly set in Pittsburgh, which is where I'm from. So stay tuned for
Cool.
that. But I'm still interested in a lot of the same themes. I'm interested in power structures, women's stories, and secrets that everyone keeps too.
It's a far cry from Russia.
Yeah, I don't know if we'll have Soviet Russia make an appearance, but you never know. I'm early on, so we'll see.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, I think that's. Thank you so much, Laura, for joining us today. The Secrets We Kept is available wherever books are sold, especially the local Austin bookstores that we know and love. And I guess the paperback is on its way out. So
Yes.
stay tuned.
Stay tuned for that. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Laura.
All right.